But even as we withdrew to regroup our forces, we encountered a new enemy. Winter was upon us. Our hastily improvised airfields were flooded, our planes earthbound. The roads became running streams. Our tanks immobilized. All hopes of a quick victory had finally foundered in a sea of mud. But the race for Tunis and Bizerte had not been in vain. For our battle lines, now stabilized, ran south from Medjez El Bab through Usultia, Faid, Maknassi, and Gafsa, along the barrier ridge of mountains known as the Great Dorsal, which separated the German-occupied coastal plain from the mountainous regions to the west. German expansion was possible only through a series of passes traversing the Great Dorsal, and all through the winter months we held those passes against incessant German attack. This was the period referred to by the world as one of military inactivity. A period during which we sustained nearly half the total casualties incurred during the whole North African campaign.
That's right. When you read in your papers about lulls that don't apply to George Metcalfe and the poor bloody infantry, never did. We're on the job every night, patrols in the hills and in the woods. Off we go with some Brens and Tommy guns and a few Mills bombs, and if we're lucky, we scupper a few Jerrys and bring a few prisoners in. Old Fred Parker's the best. He was a poacher. That's second nature to old Fred. When we get back, we're camouflaged so you can't tell whether we're men or walking lumps of mud. We picked up about half Tunisia when we got back this morning. We just about scraped it off when we had to go out again at dusk and pick up the other half. Great life. You'd think mud would be different in Africa. Different from France, say. Old Fred says it weighs heavier here and don't smell the same, but me, I can't tell any difference. It turns white bread into brown just like the other stuff. Keeping the automatics and rifles clean is the worst. Old Fred's only got about half the tail of his shirt left. There's one thing we do thank God for, the mules. Fancy that, mules. If it wasn't for the mules, we'd just about starve. Not that we eat them, I don't mean that, but they bring up the rations, see? Nothing but mules or eagles could ever get here. Mud, just mud. I told my girl I'll stick to her like mud, and I can't say more than that.
Whenever the fields were dry enough, our planes took off to tackle the Luftwaffe. Though still outnumbered, in 4 weeks they shot down 241 enemy aircraft for a loss of 89 of our own. Further back, day after day, the Strategic Air Force was taking off to kill the enemy's effort at its starting point. Liberators from the east, fortresses from the west, went forth to destroy enemy bases in Italy, Sardinia, Sicily. No offensive could be launched until spring. Against its coming, there was to be on either side of the great dorsal a building up of power. Over supply routes that spanned on the German side 150 miles of water, and on our side hundreds of miles of land, and then thousands of miles of water. The longest assembly lines in the world were in operation, from the factories of the United States and Britain, from Birmingham to Algiers, from Detroit to Iran, from Manchester, Los Angeles, from Leeds, from Pittsburgh to Casablanca. Whole trains were assembled on the spot, loaded with freight and sped forward. The South Atlantic became an airway as well as a seaway. From Brazil, flights of P-38s equipped with extra fuel tanks were flown across the seas. Each flight led by a flying fortress which provided navigation. From Gibraltar, aircraft which had been brought by ship from Britain and reassembled on the Rock were flown off to Tunisia. Nearly 1,500 planes reached the front by this route. Roads to the front were being built where none before existed. On wet, still unfinished landing strips, giant planes sat down with cargoes of materiel. Our reservoir of power was filling up. Tunisia was to be the theater of a major campaign. A campaign to be fought where Scipio had fought, and Hannibal, where already 3 times in history great armies had been destroyed between the mountains and the sea. These hills and plains were again to echo to the tempest of battle. Not now the trumpeting of elephants, but the crash of tanks and artillery. Not now an empire, but a way of life at stake.
On this Christmas 1942, our soldiers and airmen in Tunisia and the Western Desert gathered together in little churches or under the open sky. And doing so, they thought of their homes and loved ones, hundreds or thousands of miles away. Our soldiers' thoughts were of New York and the Middle West, of the cities and villages of France, of the plains and hills of India, of homes in Cape Town and the African veldt, or among the snows of Canada, or in the Christmas sunshine of New Zealand and Australia, and among the fog and rain of London and Edinburgh. And they thought of their comrades who had already been killed, and of the cause for which they had been killed, the cause that had brought all of them across the seas to fight, the cause of liberty and tolerance and dignity and peace, and of how the horizon was brightening a little as though a new day were being born.